Bill Shufelt, thank you for doing this. One of my business heroes, Elon Musk of brewing.
One of my fitness heroes. It's intimidating to sit across the table from you as just a pure recreational athlete to sit across the table from a world record holder and stuff. It's a tough comp for me.
Thank you, brother. Well, for those who don't know, Bill Shufelt is the CEO and co-founder of Athletic Brewing, the #1 non-alcoholic beer company in the world.
Not the world. We're working on that one.
As far as I'm concerned, zero fact checking here. But no, I love the product, and it's inspirational to me. Honestly, I think of it the same way I think of Elon Musk. Like, you're going to take on the car companies and beat them at their own game. Let's see you do that. And that's how I feel if someone told me they were going to start a brewery. Even for non-alcoholic beer, I'm like, have you ever heard of O'Doul's? You're never going to topple them, and you've completely disrupted the industry, and I would argue built an industry, and now there's more new players entering every year, and I hope you take a minute to reflect and think like, holy crap, I did this.
Oh, I mean, thank you so much. That's an incredibly high bar to live up to from the jump. I mean, Elon is way out ahead of the curve and working on incredibly high-tech things. I'm over here selling things that hurt if you drop them on your feet. But in these cans, like it didn't exist 10 years ago. We have a lot of commonality in our background, and moderation and sobriety was like totally socially inaccessible and unenjoyable 10 years ago. And, in these little cans, I think we're step by step, person by person, hopefully positively impacting tens of millions of lives. And, that's what I set out to change, and having a lot of fun doing it. And just getting going too, like you said.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be involved with you for the past several years. I'll never forget, and I use this example when I speak to people all the time, especially founders and investors. When I came to see you in Connecticut at the brewery, first of all, the brewery was like so impressive. I was like blown away. I'm like, this is crazy. It is to think that it didn't exist 10 years ago. I said, wow, this is a great business. Like, what's the exit strategy? Like, you sell to a strategic? And you said to me, like, I'm never selling this. Like, I love this company. And I was like, oh, we've got a real missionary on our hands here. And I tell investors and founders, like, there's missionaries and mercenaries. Mercenaries, like, they have an eye on the exit. They know what they want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if I'm going to make a bet, I like the missionary. Personally, I like the missionary better, because you know that they're going to go down with the ship. They're willing to die to win. That's the energy that I get from you, from one of the most humble and laid back guys I know. I definitely get that energy of like, I'll kill you to win in the healthiest of ways.
Yeah, definitely a lot there to unpack. On the breweries to begin with, I have an incredible co-founder, John Walker, and we've been working together and growing together and learning together ever since 2017 when we were homebrewing on Gatorade jugs. And that's gone from, plastic Gatorade jugs to a 3-barrel system to a 20-barrel brew house. And then we, 3,000 miles across the country, built a brewery that was about 5 times that size, and then quadrupled that one. The next brewery was 100 times the size of that first one. And we were putting steel in the ground in big size before manufacturing was cool in this country. And, we had a lot of ethos on building that quality from the ground up, like US-made infrastructure, hiring people with full-time jobs. And so we can get back to all that too. But yeah, I'm the missionary and mercenary too. Like, I know both of us left really strong careers in finance, and, I thought for sure I would have never left that. But I had this vision that the world had a huge hole in it. And the economic reality of that future was very uncertain for me and my family. But the potential positive impact on that was like a much more fulfilling endpoint than, a somewhat hollow monetary endpoint. And that's where I got to like the missionary versus mercenary. It's like, capital structure can take a lot of forms, and non-alcoholic beer was about 0% of the beer market when we got into it. It's been an enormous slog to get it to 2% of the beer market. But we know with enormous confidence in our hearts that non-alcoholic beer is going to 10%, 20%, and maybe even like 50% of the beer market over time. And that may or may not happen without Athletic Brewing leading the charge with great beer and great marketing, great people behind it. And so whatever form the capital structure takes, like, I'm going to be the one driving that bus with John.
Yeah, there's so much. We have so much to discuss, including raising capital from permanent capital investors, which is It's hard. Anyone who knows anything about raising capital will tell you it's incredibly difficult to find the kind of investors you found early on that were willing to give you essentially permanent capital and wait for the dividend structure
so
to
lucky,
take place. Just the whole thing is almost miraculous, but it just speaks to your tenacity and perseverance to be able to not only conceive of this, but to actually execute it.
On the word like miraculous, it's funny you say that. Not to get too weird or anything, my mom passed away 25 years ago, but she instilled this like incredible optimism in me as a child. Like, you say crazy things in middle school with really big goals and like competing in the Olympics or like things that 0.1% of people get to levels of different things. And she made me believe I could do any of those things. And in terms of like miraculous, like one of the books that 12 years ago, like right around the time I stopped drinking, kind of potentially changed my life was the book The Alchemist, which is, it's basically the universe conspiring to help you achieve your goals. Like if you know what you want to do. And then I'm also a big fan of this word pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia, but it's basically like you're like, rather than being like on the lookout and paranoid that everything's going to go wrong all the time, I feel like I just have this delusional optimism that, kind of fuels my fire.
I definitely get that energy from you, and I love it. It's one of the reasons I like spending time with you is you got good positive energy and always super optimistic. But you mentioned your mom. Where did you grow up?
Grew up in a great community up in Connecticut, Darien, Connecticut.
Yep.
Very, very lucky where I landed on this earth. It's a really great town. I have an awesome family, had a ton of extended family in the town. And basically everyone in the town, at least at that point, like works in finance basically. Yeah. And so had a great childhood there.
And where'd you go to college?
Middlebury College in Vermont.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then get out of school, you moved to New York and start working immediately in finance?
Yep.
Where'd you work?
So my mom passed away right around the end of high school. I would say I was on as aggressive a track as you could be through high school. And every honors class, 3-sport captain, volunteer on the ambulance, was an EMT and then an ambulance driver.
Jeez.
Like every activity under the sun. Even my electives beyond all honors classes, I would take like Latin and my parents weren't driving that. That was me. Like they were encouraging me to try to find spots to take a step back. And I just like was grinding so hard for whatever TBD endpoint. I think it's just internal competition. But then I think, blew off some steam, had fun in college. And there's probably a lot to unpack there with like my mom dying, like, maybe lack of discipline, stuff like that. But had a lot of fun in college, not as much school going on, but I always had like default finance in my head. So, of course I did the interviews at every bulge bracket bank, went to the super days and didn't get any jobs or internships in finance.
Really?
So kind of started at the bottom of the rung in finance at a company called Knight Capital Group, which that was my perception at the time. Yeah. In no means was it actually the bottom.
No.
I went to this trading floor of 500 great people. The culture in that building, like it was, I actually had a Middlebury professor who said, you might want to consider this firm. He's like, if you're that interested in trading, it is like the trading shop. Yeah. And I got in there and got like an unbelievable education in trading, unbelievable mentors in the building, a great culture, 500 people in that room in sales and trading, like open call, like mics on all the time.
What were you trading?
Started on the help desk, worked my way off that in 6 to 12 months, did biotech, then jumped to a financials desk through 2007, 2008,
equities.
2009. Yeah, equities.
Always equities,
so,
okay.
Financials through the crisis, and then most of the rest of my finance career was in like biotech and healthcare.
I gotcha. Yeah, no, for people that don't know, a trading desk is a very unique place that not a lot of people get to experience. Yeah. Focus isn't just about grinding harder, it's about fueling smarter. When I'm working, training, or recording, I need my brain to show up. That's why I use Ketone IQ. It's clean brain fuel. No caffeine, no crash, just steady mental energy that lasts. It gives your brain what it actually wants, ketones. They cross the blood-brain barrier to power your neurons directly. No jitters, no drop-off. You just stay locked in longer. For me, it's the difference between pushing through and feeling dialed in. Whether I'm deep in work, on a long run, or traveling, Ketone IQ keeps me sharp, calm, and focused. If you want to think clearer and last longer, Head to ketone.com/rideout for 30% off your subscription order, plus a free gift with your second shipment. Fuel your mind like you mean it. There's definitely like a hierarchy of prestige when it comes to banks, right? With Goldman Sachs kind of at the top, and then you start working your way down, not to insult anyone, but like Knight Capital might not be in the second tier, and it's like, but the people there are grinding extra hard because when you work at those big bulge bracket banks, like if you're a bond salesman, they have new issue bonds every single day. So all you're really doing is calling people and telling them, like, I have these and they need them. If you don't know fixed income, you have to constantly be buying bonds. They mature, blah, blah, blah. But I used to tell people, when you work at those bulge bracket banks and then you go to like a Yankee bank, like Credit Agricole where I was, or even a Knight Capital, and the traders come down there and they struggle. And I'm like, well, at those bulge brackets, you were like the guy in the crane, operating the crane on a construction site. Here, you have a shovel. And it's like, now you're going to find out like how really good you are.
Yeah, with no research product.
Exactly.
No reason for, like, the research product is you.
That's right.
It is like, you have to be on the desk earlier than all your people you're covering.
100%.
And you have to add value for them every day. And when they opened up their phone in the morning, I wanted them to scroll through and look for my name.
Yep.
And be like, this is what's going on in the world, and this is the first thing I'm going to read. But that requires you to be there early. Like, you've got to be there when they're you've got to have that already written in their inbox when they're commuting. But I did, before Middlebury, I was at on a top of the world track, and I was like really happy about that. And then, honestly, like, underperformed, slacked off. And I paid the price for that, where I started my career. And, at night, worked really hard. I got my CFA in 3 years. Outside of that, that's like a 300 to 500 hour a year studying commitment.
You were not faking your way through CFA. That's like serious studying.
Yeah, there's like 10,000 people in those rooms a year, and they're hard tests. And, but I was making $35,000 a year, and I had almost all my friends at bulge bracket banks making a guaranteed 100,000 salary, 100,000 bonus.
Yep.
And I had a real complex around that. And so I was working hard, and I intended to just work at night and move my way up. And I think I was like making a name for myself in the room, and I had an incredible boss there, a number of them, from Andrew and Colin to start, and then John, and then a guy named Joe Mazzella gave me a huge chance, and is just an incredible guy. But then, I basically told Joe, I was like, I would hitch my wagon to you the rest of my career. And like, one of the best things he ever did was like push me towards like, what's that next step in your chapter? Like, let me help you get to there. And, those types of people who believe in you along the way and see your hard work and see potential that I didn't even see in myself. Like, I remember Joe saying, you're going to run your own firm someday. You're going to run your own business. And I was laughing at that in my head. I was like, there's absolutely no way I will ever run my own business. But that kind of confidence was like, really helped push me and drive me. And then one day, like, my dream shop, Knight was like the trading, like through especially the credit crisis and stuff. Yeah. The volumes going through Knight Capital were like 100 million share orders coming in, because all the other bank counterparties had credit risks and stuff. And like, the volume going through those pipes was like once in a lifetime. And then, the next dream job that I thought I would never get a look at was SAC Capital, which was like going from the sell side to the buy side, the top of the heap in trading shops.
That is an aggressive place too.
Getting into, I helped run the intern program at SAC for a few years and like look through applications. And I said to my wife, like, this intern program is like 40 times as hard to get into as Harvard. So I felt so lucky to even get my foot in the door for a conversation there, and got hired there. That was a moment to just get in and work my tail off at SAC and, help those top of the heap traders, and especially Steve, and earn it every single day. And I mean, talk about an environment that if you didn't show up and be on fire, like, there's a lot like written and speculated about Steve, but it is as meritocratic an institution as they're in. You are graded every day. He is on it. Like, if there is something happening in the market, he figures it out in 30 seconds, and he will blast you if you've missed it and it's in your sector, and if you're off one day. But if you show up every day and are doing your best, like, it is a very fair and meritocratic institution too. So that was the kind of chance I was looking for too, as like the next chapter. And so I did 6 or 7 years at night and 6 or 7 years at SAC in Point 72.
That's the one thing that you said that I appreciate about finance and Wall Street in particular is very much a meritocracy. If you do a good job there, I don't care who you are, where you've come from, what your ethnicity, race, sexuality, like you make money for people on those trading desks so that you can write your own ticket. Like you can do basically what you want to do in terms of your career path. Also, for people who don't know, SAC is Steve Cohen, who now owns the Mets and is one of the most successful hedge funds in the world ever. But everyone I know that worked there is like, that is an aggressive place. And for people who haven't worked in finance, you have no idea the level of aggressiveness. It would be an HR nightmare if someone was watching in real time because people that are coming from other industries that aren't in finance, they wouldn't even know whether to their head would spin if they saw how aggressive it is there.
It's a performance culture that not everyone's built for. But there are people who, like me, who are built for that too. And
not just performance though, the physical aggressiveness and intimidation is very real. If you, like you said, if you didn't show up ready to go, you'd be berated.
For sure. And there's a very high level of expectation and a way to sift through who are the most talented people in the room and who's going to get those opportunities, who's going to get teamed up with the best portfolio managers. And you're graded every day. And, it's not an environment where you're taking 2-week vacations. There will be someone in that seat when you get back.
It's funny. I don't even think, I would be surprised, honestly, if they even had a vacation policy, meaning you can take as much time as you want. Well, you take too much and you are not going to have a job.
Yeah, leaving that world and founding a company. And I wanted a meritocracy where people come in and have unbounded opportunity, which is what I wanted. But then you figure out things like, it's, you can't just put everyone on salary and give them a ton of opportunity, let them run. There has to be real structure throughout everything. But no, they follow all the rules over there for sure. But but within that, they offer so much opportunity too.
That's what I was going to say is the upside to all that aggressiveness and work environment is that you can become fabulously wealthy. And that's what I want to get to, when you made the decision to leave there. But before we get to that, what was the alcohol situation like through night and then Cohen? How much were you drinking? What prompted the adventure into non-alcoholic beer? I assume you stopped drinking first.
Yeah. So it's, I'd been on that track, I guess, growing up in a town that was extremely finance oriented and saw successful as a monetary endpoint. So I thought I was on the career path I wanted to be on. I thought money was the most important endpoint. And, I was just going to work as hard as I could to get to that endpoint, essentially as early in age as I could get to that endpoint too. But I was also under the assumption that nobody liked work too. And so I was working extremely hard, going out to 3 or 4 work dinners a week. The expectation is, well, you can not go out to work dinners too, but it is a very social industry. You can go out, you could either sit at home or you could go out to research dinners and learn. You could go out to broker dinners and build better relationships with the people. So when you call and pick up their phone, they know you, they trust you, they know how you interact. You've got to maintain those relationships. So when there's a fire drill and you're calling someone and need to convey something in 8 seconds, that person knows you beyond,
that's right.
Hi, what's your name again? And so, I was out 150 nights a year, maintaining those relationships, learning my industry, at the desk, usually at 6 a.m. in the morning after that, trying to work out before. And, Sunday nights were, my Sunday scaries for the week ahead were so bad. My weeks were so intense. I was living for the weekends.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I was living for that 1 week or 2 weeks of vacation a year.
Yep.
I was that is life. Mm-hmm. And the rest of this is just a period to endure to get to that period of relaxation. And my Sundays were miserable. And as a result, I was, drinking at work dinners, but then drinking even on non-work nights to escape that stress. It is, when you have 12 monitors and you are going as hard as you can all day, you need a way to escape and wind down. And, I hadn't fully realized my love of exercise and fitness too at that point. So, alcohol was definitely one of those, the way I would escape from the stress of the day and do the windshield wipers and start it all again the next day. And so, very often it was 1 or 2 nights 1 or 2 drinks a night. And then like on weekends, depending if it was like with my wife or with friends, like there'd be hugely variable amounts of drinking, tons of bachelor parties, weddings.
Was it just
things like
drinking
that.
or were you doing drugs too?
Just drinking. Like, yeah, it's, everyone has different college phases, but mine was in Vermont, and like there's obviously like weed everywhere in Vermont, but just building on the unproductivity of my college. But the drinking like really added up, and like drinking to relieve stress, and the more stressful it gets, the more you drink.
That's
right. So ultimately, it was going from like being in my mid-20s where you can handle that easily, where you can sleep 3 hours a night and get right back at it and burn candles at both ends. Eventually, the treads on the tire really wear, and the synapses don't fire as fast. You're not as healthy. You're not as quick as you used to be. And that did start to almost, in many ways, get like self-destructive. Like if you really look at it with an honest lens, I think there were times I was drinking a lot, almost to self-destruct and get me out of the cycle I was in. Yeah. Like my body is just like, get this guy out of whatever he is doing to me every single week of the year. And so, I should have seen the writing on the wall way earlier than I did. And, I've let down in so many different ways, family, friends, my wife. Like we started dating at the end of high school. We got married in 2014 or 15. But like the amount of times I like let her down, or like, she was taking me to Turks and Caicos on my 30th birthday, and I basically missed the flight. Like had an extremely stressful work week, went out to watch, March Madness games, thought for sure I was going to make it. And, all in like a 24-hour period, I missed a flight for my 30th birthday to Turks and Caicos, which was like obviously an extremely nice planned weekend. And in the same weekend, missed my first nephew's like birth, basically. My sister called me to let me know it was happening and stuff. I was drunk, don't remember it. And then basically like asked like, what's going on? Like a day or two later, which is like, she like totally let me off the hook for that, and like probably should have held me accountable. But like things like that in hindsight are like so like personally disappointing. And I think it was like in a period there where it was all extremely condensed and there was so much stress. And, I never like wrapped my car around a telephone pole or something. And I had such great support and friends and bosses in my life that I think there was like a lot of guardrails there, and like people kind of looking out for me, but probably wearing pretty thin also on their patience. I was never like totally not performing in any area of my life. And, after drinking a lot in the spring, I started training for my first ultra marathon that summer. I was running an extra mile every weekend and like trying to stay on track, getting up to like mid 20 miles on the weekends, and like basically dying on the street. I was not in a health shape to run that. I'm not running 10 miles every morning like you, but I was like enduring and getting excited about that. And it was like one of my first fitness goals. But, during the fall there too, I went to a couple weddings where, there was one time where I got pulled over driving home from a wedding the next day, but I had been out till 4 or 5 with my college friends, and then was driving home 5 hours later. Like, if there was a breathalyzer involved there, how much does that change my career?
Yep.
Ultimately, as I was like trying to do this big endurance feat, my drinking was starting to affect work in a way. I was like more hungover, more bad days, just not up to the expectation I'd built over my career at night in SAC. And like, I just felt myself like totally falling off the goals potentially. And my wife, we were 6 months from getting married, and she was like, you've got to start putting down all the cash deposits on this stuff. Like, she's like, I don't know if we're getting to this finish line. Just like drinking too much in that like final chapter there of like the training for the first ultramarathon. I was like, I'm going to give it 30 days and see how this feels like in this like final training block. And it was like, whoa, alcohol is affecting like every single thing I care about. And there was like one final big weekend that I went into my bosses, and I was basically like, my bosses, Jeff and Phil, were incredible at Point 72 and good friends to this day. And I was basically like, I want you to hold me accountable. I'm going to make this call for good today. And I was like, I basically want you guys to send me home if I ever come in and I've been out the night before or anything ever again. And so I made a hard switch in my life that was like deeply personal. My wife helped hold me accountable. My bosses helped hold me accountable. And I feel like I got to that decision, like almost because of this arbitrary fitness goal too, that I was like carrying, but also a lot of personal and work stuff too. It was just a moment where I was turning 30, about to get married, had this big fitness goal, felt my work slipping. And had all that not happened, I no doubt would have any number of like things could have happened in the next 6 months that I don't know what that would have looked like, but it wouldn't have been great. I think a lot of people live on that edge, you know? But I immediately found too, I was like, they helped me get connected with a few people in the firm who had also stopped drinking or didn't drink, like very big senior guys who became unbelievable mentors and like got me on the right track, which is like just a lifelong, I don't know what the right word is, but I have incredible gratitude for them. You know, I was very junior to these guys. And I had incredible respect for them, and for them to help me get on the right track and feel like totally secure with that decision. And then basically be like, absolutely nobody is going to care if you stop drinking. And I was like, sure. Like I expected all my friends and all my counterparties at the banks and stuff. And I was shocked that like nobody cared that I stopped drinking, which was like a huge thing of relief. And all of a sudden I had unlocked this like biggest hack I'd ever discovered. Like I'd always been like trying to find the next like productivity hack, fitness hack, diet, everything. But I was just like washing it out with this like hugely unproductive thing in like enormous amounts, basically every day of the week. And all of a sudden when that stopped, it was like, I started reading books again. I found this like intellectual curiosity I hadn't had. My relationship with my wife got closer than I ever had. We had more meaningful connection. My friends and family, like, you know, even my brother and sister, like relationships I'd like just neglected totally unintentionally, like all started to like get really strong again. And my friends didn't care at all. Like rather than like, you know, the invites don't stop when you stop drinking. The invites stop when you have a drinking problem and people don't want you
That's
around.
a good point.
And people don't want you making stupid toasts or driving your car, getting in trouble. The invites actually, like, if anything, picked up. And like, you know, I realized too, like, wow, I must have been like really embarrassing myself as the night went on at different times too. So like, but like between like personal relationships, work productivity, fitness, like I know you've seen it, but like I went from someone who was like surviving, like I worked out all the time, but I was surviving workouts. It was like a fitness check the box, like needed to flush the system. You know, I was eating and drinking unhealthy, so I needed to work out to balance that. And I became someone who was like, wow, I love working out. This is one of the best parts of my day. I'm like, all the stress I thought I was blowing off drinking, I started to be able to attack with workouts. And I was like, oh, this is like even better for eating that stress. I can do a 30-minute treadmill sprint workout and like, I don't care what happened to you that day.
You can kill yourself in 30 minutes.
Yeah, you have thought through all the world's problems and sweated out. And, you know, I later found books like Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, where like he speaks to that too. But like between killer workouts and all of a sudden too, like, by the way, alcohol doesn't help you sleep. It's like, yeah, so like if you take this ingredient out, you will see all of a sudden you will realize that you can have great sleep as an adult. You don't have to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning with like a ball of stress in your head.
Yep.
I sleep through the night every single night, except when I have an infant or sick kid. But it's incredible. Like I discovered this world of 95% sleep scores, good fitness. My like work days were less stressful. I didn't hate Sundays anymore. Like all of a sudden work was this like intellectual challenge. I got to see my colleagues again. And I was just like firing on levels I'd never been firing as an adult. All within like, it's not like a one-day thing. You got to like do the work. But like within 6 months, I was like a totally different human. And I considered myself an extremely high-performing person. And I grew more in the next 6 months and then like 10 years after than I could have ever imagined growing as an adult. And so I was like so lucky to have this like confluence of moments and realization at the very near bottom there. Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is to give people examples of other people who've done hard things, whether it's coming back from addiction, alcoholism. I've had guys that have done real prison time come out and turn their lives around. And that's one of the messages here is like, no one is going to do anything for you. The only person that can tell you anything about you is yourself. And if you don't like your station in life, change it. The only person that can dictate what you do tomorrow and the rest of today is you. So many people from finance will ask me, like, how'd you make the switch? How'd you do this? And I'm like, you know what I did? I jumped off the cliff and prayed to God and didn't sleep for several months. But I was like, I cannot sacrifice my happiness for some financial, a little bit of financial comfort. I'd rather, I was saying earlier, when it comes, and I'm going to we're going to talk about when you decided to make the switch from finance to being an entrepreneur and basically probably not making money for a long time. I decided at some point in my case that I would rather be dead than just chasing money and working in a job that I didn't like, that the people, like, there was nothing redeeming about it other than money.
Yeah. From the outside in, there's such hate for Wall Street. Like there's such an appearance of money and excess. And there are people working incredibly hard and sacrificing everything in those seats. But no one feels sorry for someone like I was. I use the word I, but I am representative of just like millions and millions of people in any job. Like
that's what I was going to say. Take the finance out of it.
Yeah.
We're talking about leaving a job where you're wealthy to go do something challenging.
Yeah, but like not all prisons have walls. Like
that's right.
You can walk in and out of your own daily prison, but like, and it's not only career, like the expectation was so high, and I put that mostly on myself. Like I'm not blaming anyone for that, especially in a city like New York City. You can make any amount of money and the expectation is so high and the lifestyle meets any salary that shows up.
Some people thrive at that.
And then, and I know no one's going to feel sorry for someone who's like living in an apartment in the West Village with a golf club membership and stuff like that. But the stress, the expectation, the intensity of the work week, the impossibility to stay on top of your health. But more than anything too is like the empty endpoints is one of the big missing things. Like you can be as like intellectually stimulated and like the dopamine of like wins on a daily basis and things and like short-term things for sure hit. But like the lack of like a long-term real goal to latch onto and an impact and like a chance to impact people is like, was truly prison to me. And I like, if you asked me before I stopped drinking, would I hit fast forward on my life for 5 years or 10 years, like not knowing what happens in that decade even, I would have absolutely probably hit fast forward for 10 years.
Exactly.
Which is like incredibly sad. But it shows I was like just enduring this like painful, unfulfilling part of my life to get to whatever that next thing was. But I would have never imagined there was a different way to do it also. I didn't see it. I think that like the lack of fulfillment is where like the drinking and like a lot of the stress came from too. But it very heavy and extremely stressful. I can't tell you how tough like the Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays especially are. And even like the prospect of like a 3-day weekend was like, oh my goodness. But then like, also, like, I would totally blow those 3-day weekends. Yeah. Like, when you're, like, drinking that much and stuff, too, like, one of the best uncoverings of stopping drinking was, like, you have, like, 300 fresh hours of weekend that you don't otherwise have. Like, I naturally wake up at 6:30 a.m., if not earlier, on weekend mornings and, like, feel so good, work out, love cooking breakfast with my family. Before kids, it was, like, go for workouts, go to a juice bar. And like, those were all of a sudden like great hours. They were terrible hours when I was drinking.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. And that's what I hope that people take away from this is never mind like, oh, he left a big job. Well, number one, who created that? You. No one gave you anything, right? You created this job. So I'm hoping that the audience takes away from this, like, forget what the job was. The point is how you could give up monetary freedom for something emotionally and from a mental health perspective, much more rewarding. And I always think when people are going to make any kind of change, whether it's sobriety, career change, I always think of the expression, the road to heaven feels like hell, and the road to hell can feel like heaven. You're being duped into thinking that by just going with the flow and not doing anything to change your circumstances, it feels relaxing. You know what's coming. There's no uncertainty. but you're heading towards a dead end. Like
Yeah.
no emotional fulfillment if all you're doing is striving for money. And to your point, I had no money, then I had a lot of money, and I became addicted to drugs because the pressure and the stress of all that, as crazy as it sounds, and I don't expect anyone to feel bad for me, but I just say if you think that your only goal is to make money, like you're gonna be sorely disappointed when you get there and realize I'm still the same person. I came with me here.
Well, a big wake up for me too was I was not wealthy. I was not that far along in my financial career. Hopefully I was on my way, but I was starting to meet a fair amount of people with 50, 100 plus $1 million and realizing that like I do not like interacting with them. I do not like these. I thought these were where I wanted to be, and I should maybe really be rethinking that too.
My friend James Davies had a big job at Deutsche, was like CEO of North America or something to that effect. And he was thinking of making a career change, which he has, and leaving banking. And I said to him one day, I said, yo, I guarantee you have 10 to 100 times more money than I do. But I said, do you think that you're happier than me? Because we're good friends. And he like sees like I've done some fun stuff when I started like taking control of my own situation professionally. And he was like, no, I'm not happy. I said, so then what are you doing? Like, what do you need 10 more? I said, so what, you can take a trip and you can stay at the Four Seasons in the Caribbean instead of like an Airbnb. I said, drive my kids down to like Destin, Florida and rent a house. My kids are little enough. They don't know if they're at the Four Seasons, the Taj Mahal, or like their uncle's house. It's just, they're at the beach. And that's the thing, is you get in those circles and you think that by keeping up with the Joneses, well, if they went to the Four Seasons, like I can't go stay at the Western. I have to be at the Ritz or the Four Seasons myself. But so talk me through the decision-making process when you've got, even if you don't think you're wealthy, you're not succeeding at Steve Cohen at SAC without making millions of dollars. So you got this career, you don't really necessarily like the lifestyle, but you're making money. Like what was the thought process? And what was the emotional and mental exercise you went through talking to your wife, and you come out, you have an idea about this? Like, what made you actually make the jump and have the insane optimism that you could do this?
Yeah, and I mean, even after I stopped drinking, it's a great world-class firm. Steve gives everyone all the opportunity in the world. I loved my colleagues, like the people I sat on the trading desk with, and some of my PMs were just awesome people, and like so intellectually sharp too. It's like,
Did you happen to cross paths with Mike Zimmerman when you were there?
I don't think so.
He runs Prentice Capital now, but he was a SAC guy. Anyway,
I mean, he's
great guy.
graduated more great fund managers than anyone. And some of these people I talk to, especially some of the biotech specialists, are some of the smartest people I've ever interacted in my life. And the way they can see a headline that 1,000 other people see and have a totally differentiated contrarian take is something I very much learned from interacting with these people. So I would not trade the lessons and the colleagues I got to meet there for anything in the world. It was a great spot to sharpen your sword in your career. But when I stopped drinking, I expected to be on this island and take a big step back. And I very quickly realized that none of my friends cared. Yeah. And so I was still being social, still going out to weddings and dinners with my wife and other couples and stuff. And then I started to have other friends start to ask me too, just so I had asked the senior guy at Point 72, like, how did you do it? Like, what was your path like? And he was so generous with his time. These people started to come to me and like ask me like, oh, how was it? Like, are you like a total outsider? Like, and they'd like whisper and be like very self-conscious about like stopping drinking has it's much less in other civilizations or other countries, but in the U.S., since we had prohibition and since like it's been steered to be anonymous, like I have all the respect. I think AA does great things. I think it's a great program, but there is this like anonymity stigma to it that you should be like, keep it like in a way, like keep it to yourself. Yeah. It's something to be embarrassed about. Like, had people like come to me and like kind of whisper through the stigma and be like, how is it like? And I was like, it's unquestionably the best thing that's ever happened to me. And like every single part of my life's better.
For people that drinking and doing drugs, like I hope they hear that.
And people would be like absolutely blown away by that. But I helped like 3 or 4 good friends with families get sober. And those interactions were like the most meaningful thing at that point that ever happened to me in my life. So I was kind of going about my way and had those small interactions, and, I'd be out at all my work dinners and stuff, and there were no options at all too. And so I was like, I don't think my experience is like that abnormal. I started to wonder like, why, like there've got to be more people than me not drinking here. Like I would pay $10 for a good beer if it didn't have alcohol. I'd pay $15 for a good cocktail if like the bartender just cared to make something decent rather than just like a soda water with a lime. And I was staying there and like just thinking this has got to be an unmet opportunity. But, I'd go out to work dinners and drink an O'Doul's if they had it and, get kind of made fun of by my colleagues a little bit. And there was like enough social friction where it was a bit awkward. But more than anything, it was like disappointing from a culinary perspective. As someone who loved beer, I love food, I love socializing. Like part of the reason I was an alcoholic was because I loved socializing. I didn't like going home. And like if anyone was still out, that was going to be me. Like, so I just generally liked having fun. I'm a total joker. And there was like the disappointing amount of options too. And that festered with me in like just so many restaurants, so many bars. There were no options, weddings being super awkward, like not holding anything in your hand at a wedding for 3 hours. Like all this like social friction. I was like, eventually it kind of broke. I was walking to dinner with my wife one night. I was like, why wouldn't there just be like a decent non-alcoholic beer? Could someone put like a half an effort into it? Like I would buy all of them. And along this time too, I started to just like look up like how many people in this country don't drink, like how many people are documented alcoholics. And there are 15 million documented alcoholics in this country, more or less, in any given year. And
if that's documented, it's got to be closer to like 5 times that of people. To your point, it's like not something that people like shout from the rooftops. That's why they call it Alcoholics Anonymous. Everyone wants to be anonymous in there. It should be something that's a source of pride. Like, hey, I'm not doing things that are knowingly bad for me.
Yeah, and then I read stats like 50% of adults have 0.1 drinks or less per week. I was like, oh. And then it's like, oh, only like 10% of adults have more than like 7 drinks a week. I was like, oh. And I was like, wow, maybe I was just in like the very upper band of this. And then I started to think, I was like, the beverage industry then is missing like half the population. Yep. And so are bars and restaurants. Like I used to live above a great bar in the West Village. And I think like 25% of independent bars in this country have shut down in the last 20 years just because like less and less people are going out. There's less community. There's not like a local watering hole where people like go and like work out their problems and blow off steam from the workday. And like there is a natural moderation trend happening. And I was just like staring that down and I was like saying to my wife, like, why doesn't this exist? Like it's so obvious and I need it. And she was like, you should do that. Like she basically like spun me around in the path we were walking on. And I don't want to bore you with like the entrepreneur story that you know so well, but like it took.
Also, it's important to me. I love this.
It took her recognizing like the need I personally felt. And then my wife did an incredible job of connecting a lot of the dots too, where she was like, we talked about it so excitedly that whole dinner. We got back to the hotel room. We were on a vacation in Jamaica at the time. We got back to the hotel room and just started like Googling like trends and stats and stuff. And it just like, it uncovered to me that there were like, just like the numbers are so big of people that don't drink. And I'd seen it with the same brokers I used to go out to tons of dinners at. And I'd started to have pretty unbelievable success being like, hey, instead of the dinner, do you want to like do like a Barry's Boot Camp or a Tone House or like a Soul Cycle? And everyone was like, thank God, yes. Like, and,
I agree. I know.
And so all these data points were circling in my life. And, this is ahead of like Huberman and Atia and Whoop. Like that stuff wouldn't come for another few years.
I was going to say, no one's done more for the non-drinking movement than Andrew Huberman.
For sure. And I love his podcast and like what him and Atia do and like Rhonda Patrick, like condensing information for busy people is beyond positive impact.
It's crazy to think that it's free as well. You can listen to it on YouTube or stream it on the services. And Andrew also is like, he's exactly who you see on that podcast. He wrote a beautiful blurb for the cover of my book. He's been nothing but supportive and friendly to me. And his producer and business manager and partner, Rob Moore, is also the producer of this show. Rob Moore has been one of my closest allies in the world. And I know that they think the world of Athletic Brewing as well.
They've done such an incredible service for the world and myself personally, from, even from like big health building blocks to like pretty sick productivity enhancements too. But yeah, my wife, so I was like living that personal productivity curve before like Whoop bands, Oura rings, and like these resources were as acceptable and or accessible. And it wasn't as obvious like health and wellness was going to be like such a mega trend.
Yeah.
But my wife did a really good job connecting those dots. She was like, you're clearly out in front of this curve just personally between like my personal fitness goals. You know, I'm up for trying any supplement or like I was like such an early Athletic Greens user and like don't mean to mention a competitor. Sorry.
That's all right.
But I iterate all those things. I was like an early kombucha drinker, and so anyway, I was on this like health and wellness curve, I think ahead of the game. But what my wife really connected was she was like, that work you did on yourself, like getting yourself sober and like doing the honest work and like then helping other people get sober and like the impact that felt to you. She's like, if you created that beverage category that's missing out there, it wouldn't just be one-on-one interaction. It would be tens of thousands of people, then hundreds of thousands of people, then millions of people. She's like, you might go from having a financial career where, you know, you're making money for us and we're taking nice vacations to positively impacting like literally hundreds of millions of people a year. And more importantly, when our kids turn 21, they won't feel the pressures you felt. There will be a menu you can open up and they can drink non-alcoholic or whatever in the same setting with no stigma. And so my wife connected all those dots, like us talking and like business planning excitingly. And that I would say is where you go from like a really great salary and secure career, but stare down this once in a lifetime mission and chance to make a positive impact on like literally potentially hundreds of millions of people. And that was like the moment where she sat me down and we had that conversation after 2 years of business planning and didn't sleep for 2 nights, quit my job and have never looked back. Yeah. And like, as you said, like did not make $1 for 3 years. Like, thank goodness the system is like set up for entrepreneurs. Like the more money you lose, like the safety net kind of catches you a little bit. But it's funny. I never once thought about going back to that career. Like even with no money, it was like the promise of the impact was like the most full my cup had ever been. Yeah.
Same here. I never considered going back to that job. And I've been offered like real jobs and I was like, nah, I'd rather be happy. Whether it's my training, recovery, or work, it all depends on how I fuel myself. That's why I love Athletic Brewing Company, the nation's leading non-alcoholic brewery. Launched back in 2018, they've completely shattered expectations for how great non-alcoholic brews can taste. The stuff genuinely tastes awesome, and their NA brews aren't just for the sober. This is truly great near beer. Whether you're not drinking for a round, a day, a month, or forever, with over 25 styles brewed each year, Athletic Brewing has got something for everyone. Personally, I love the Run Wild IPA and Athletic Light. They've become part of my routine. No hangover, no compromise. So whether you're looking to buy online or in person, go to athleticbrewing.com. If you're buying online, use promo code Rideout for 25% off your first order. That's athleticbrewing.com, code Rideout. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. So you decide to make the plunge. Who were the first investors you go out to and what was the feedback? Because raising money on an idea is incredibly difficult. It's what I've been doing for the last several years. So I know firsthand that hearing no from like several people a day and, you know, it's like wrestling or jujitsu. If you're not afraid to like learn lessons through the losses, you're never going to be great because you have to be able to learn from the setbacks. But talk me through that early capital raise and what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many analogs to life where like the easier something is, it's almost bad for you.
Exactly.
And like if you get no practice, if you're not sharpening your sword, if you're not like if you don't need to train, you're going to get smoked when you actually get to the game.
That's right.
And so I remember like I was working with our outside counsel who's now our GC. He's like incredible friend and one of the most impactful people on this journey. But I remember I had this 96-page white paper on what non-alcoholic beer could be in this country. And I was like, okay, I'll be back in 2 weeks with like the money raised. And he kind of laughed. And I knew a lot of people both from my childhood and from my career that I thought this was going to be the easiest round in the world to fill. I thought I'd reach out to like 15 people and, you know, the round would fill up. And I very quickly learned that even if people are worth a lot of money. Like angel checks are typically very small. Like there's a, you don't have to do too many angel investments to learn that like it's a very long time horizon and high fail rate. So people had clearly researched that and looked into it more than me. But a lot of like I had some friends and some colleagues who were like immediate yeses, but it was a much narrower scope of immediate yeses than I would have ever guessed. And like money is weird. I didn't want it to affect friendships and stuff. So I basically didn't go out to a lot of people, and I didn't follow up to. If I gave someone the deck and talked to them about it, I never followed up because like there's like an obligation of a friendship there and money that I didn't want to cross. And so ultimately like a very high amount of people I knew really well passed. And, around age 32, like a lot of people have moving parts in their life too. So certainly no judgments. And I also wasn't following up with people. So like a lot of people were like, kind of like, what the hell? You never followed up with me? So I went through probably like 3 months and I'd racked up like 60 or 70 no's at this point, which like 60 or 70 is like it's really hard for people to like put context to numbers like that. But if you like one of those would be, no one is like, it's not like I'm working in the same building with these people. So I'd have to take like an hour train, meet people on their schedule, which is almost always evening or morning before work, spend like an hour or two with people, and then you don't really hear back. And then so rinse and repeat that 60 times over a 3-month period. Some of them were groups of like 8 people where, I had in a few dinners in Fairfield County with like 4 or 5, 8 people at the dinners, all with significant means. And I got skunked at a few of those dinners, so it was really shocking to me. But then all of a sudden, like it was mostly like one layer from people I knew well who had kind of passed would connect me to someone else. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people didn't understand non-alcoholic beer, just couldn't imagine it in their life and had no perception of it, but I had lived it. But very often there was it was like such a shocking business model that they probably ended up talking about socially. And a lot of those conversations led to like a really passionate inbound. And so all of a sudden, 3 months in, I started getting inbounds from people I didn't know but had a decent reference to. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, the yes is starting to rack up really quickly. And I'm like kind of breezing over it. This was like an incredibly dark period of all no's. At the same time, overlaying that, I was getting rejected by, I thought finding a partner to build the business with on the brewing side would be very easy. And I was getting all no's on the brewing side too, like literally hundreds of them before I met our incredible co-founder, John.
So crazy.
John was in New Mexico, but I was like, if I had even like the inkling of an enthusiastic potential conversation, like I had people reaching out from like Vermont who were like, a college friend of mine talked to someone in Vermont who was actually really excited about it. And so I'd just pretend to have a meeting in Vermont. I was like, I'm going to be up there next Wednesday anyway. Like, let's grab a coffee.
That's funny that I would always do that when someone was like in San Diego when I was working on the trading desk. The woman at PIMCO was like, I'm doing a triathlon in San Diego next week. And I'm like, I'm going to be out there. I should do it with you.
And I was just like desperate for like a slight glimmer of hope.
Yep.
But this group of connections I did 120 meetings. Our angel round was 66 individuals, incredible group of people, such great supporters, all really passionate about what we were doing. And I kept them up on the journey and they became like a band of like super ambassadors for what we were doing.
Can I ask you how much you raised on the first round?
Yeah, originally the business plan said so originally it was going to be much more capital light, and I was going to try to do it out of my life savings, me and my wife. And my wife and I had kind of committed to, this is the amount of money we're going to put into the business. It was a significant part of our life savings. And then this is what we're going to cut our family budget back to for 3 years. And we kind of just agreed to that, and which is a huge sacrifice on her side. Like you really cannot do this well without good household alignment. And
that's why these stories are important though, so people can realize like sometimes you got to like risk it all and the rewards can be.
Yeah. And you got to have that support system too. Yeah. It is so tough. Like I would say after like 3 months of absolutely nothing positive going right, my brother like called to check in and he was like, let's go skiing. He's like, let's go to the Pacific Northwest. And he like, I think he paid for most of it. And we went for 3 days to the Pacific Northwest and like totally blew off steam and came back with a full head of energy. But yeah, ended up with this incredible angel investor group. And like at the same time, I'd gotten a lot of rejection and had like really sharpened how I talk about it too. Like it had been a long time since I'd had to sell anything. And so that was a really valuable experience for me too, to get like, when you pick up the phone at point 72, there are 200 people picking up on the first ring on the other side, like eager to help.
Yep.
And, in this business, there are no emails coming in any day, really. And unless you like sign up for a newsletter, and no one's picking up the phone, no one's responding to emails, no one's taking your meetings. One of the darkest visualizations was in the beginning, my wife and I had hung this map up on the wall and put pins all over it.
Yep.
There were all the business contacts we wanted to go see, like contract brewers, suppliers, things like that. And we were going to like fly around, rent cars, go to all these places, kind of see the country. We didn't have kids yet. And one by one, the pins came out of the map and like just the trip got canceled. I had no leads, no meetings, anything. And it was like, there was like zero momentum or interest in non-alcoholic beer. And, but that's where we started. It was fun.
And so how much was the first round? You were going to raise
so
1.2?
Along this journey, we got no meetings with contract brewers. And then I teamed up with John too. And we were kind of like working through the process and thinking, we could probably do a lot better job at this on the quality side to like build it ourselves, own the quality, do everything ourselves. And like we were working on that thesis. That was like a really pivotal decision.
To build out your own brewery versus using a contract manufacturer who essentially brews your formula.
Yeah, and so most CPG goods are outsourced, rightfully so, like in the manufacturing. Like who wants to put the steel in the ground?
Of course.
Bottling lines, packaging lines. These are really sophisticated robotic machines worth hundreds of thousands and tens of millions of dollars at scale. And so there are good networks to plug into for most CPG. But we were reinventing how non-alcoholic beer was made. It was made previously with very industrialized processes. It was an only lager category. And we wanted to make really delicate, nuanced craft beer and non-alcoholic. And it just required a totally different approach and reinventing how it was made. And so we, back in 2017, before this was a popular decision, or like I think it's getting easier right now to like repatriate manufacturing, we decided that we were going to put steel in the ground from day one. And that was a very unpopular decision with investors. Like investors do not want to see a category that the entire TAM at the time was under $100 million in the category. There'd been no growth for decades. Consumers were not asking for it. Nobody was working on it. There was no momentum in it. So it was like kind of a very capital heavy approach to an uninvestable category. So long story short, we ended up raising $3 million in that first swing. Yeah. And
for those that don't know, TAM is the total addressable market. So how many people there is, all your potential customers, essentially.
Yeah.
And so you make the decision, you partner with John, you raise the $3 million, and what do you like? What's next? What are the first steps? Like, where are like the highlights that you think, the things that went right and wrong?
Yeah, along that path, like we're home brewing for like a good slug of the day.
And by the way, one quick thing, were you like a big craft beer guy before you did this? Like, were you in the Beer of the Month club? Did you love like unique beers?
I would say I was like a light beer lager guy in high school. And then when I went to Middlebury, I fell in love with craft beer. Cause like, there was some of the amazing emerging craft brewers up around that area. And plus like super local beer we could get on tap and plug it into our off-campus house kegerator. And so fell in love there with craft beer. Ironically, craft beer was like not as accessible in New York City as Vermont after, but I still loved great beer, great food. I had never brewed a batch of beer in my life. So like in that 2 years of business planning, I read every brewing textbook out there and had delusional confidence that I was like in the know on brewing. And I immediately after like meeting John and getting more in the brewing community, like gained an enormous respect for like the skills and the science of brewing. And I know the image of like brewers with beards and like people think they're just like tossing things in tanks. It is incredibly precise and scientific, and there is a ton of knowledge there.
I think of him riding that the bike that has one big giant wheel in the front and the little one in the back with like a handlebar mustache.
So we were home brewing by day, and we were lucky to have a long lead time. Like this market was going nowhere.
And what facility were you using in the early days?
Basically, my whole life savings got basically put to signing the lease on the warehouse in Stratford, Connecticut. It was like an 8,000 square foot warehouse, 10,000 total space, 2,000 was tap room. And then, salaries and the first brewing equipment. I was like fully committed. Money.
So right from the jump, you brewed everything yourself. You've never used an outside brewery to make any of the beer.
Yeah, money spent, invested, both feet in from day one. And then that first, as the beer started to taste good, John and I working together for like 6 months, the first 30 trials were like, for the most part in John's eyes, like pretty garbage. And we were trying a lot of different methods, working through the scientific method. And all of a sudden, in like, I think it was like batch 36 started to taste like pretty good. Mm-hmm. And John was like, this is starting to taste like real beer. And John was like of the extremely high quality standards of like, he made me agree before we signed on and like started getting going that I would never force him to like launch a product unless he fully signed off that we're all the way there on quality. And he wanted it to be a totally uncompromising beer relative to the highest craft beer standards from day one. He's like, we're going to make no progress in changing people's minds about this unless it's truly great beer. The fact that I knew it was such great beer gives you such great confidence to go out and try to get that beer in people's hands. Because if you're jamming like contract brewed mediocre beer into people's hands, it's not going to work and the trend's not going to start. And there have been over 300 companies come into this category since Athletic started. And there have been all sorts of companies cycling out and failing. Like that is because almost all of them have not built a brewery, don't have any brewers, and certainly don't have John or our brewing team.
It's a crazy statistic, 300 new entrants into the market, but I think it speaks to the impact that Athletic has made, that people see that. And, imitation is what the strongest form of
flattery. Yeah. Profit and PR brings opportunists for sure. Yeah. And it's, there's a lot of cardboard facades standing up in front of absolutely nothing. Like I can't tell you how many times, this paragraph on the side of our can has been copied word for word on a website. Like
it's insanity.
And, people get the venture funding and copy this and throw it up and ask someone else to make it. And they're like, we're the next Athletic. But behind us is like, we're now up to $130 million invested in our breweries. We have 300 full-time teammates. We've been investing a ton of money, just as much money in brand and marketing. So like the depth of what we're doing in every vertical of our business is like so much deeper than the average CPG company. And I can't tell you how unpopular that was with investors too.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, as you start to get to scale and really get rolling, the economics start to look pretty good on that too.
Longevity is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but for me, it's simple. I just want to wake up every day feeling sharp, strong, and ready to get to work. That's why I've been using V14. It's a complete daily longevity formula. Very simple. 1 scoop, 14 proven ingredients, including creatine, collagen, NAD boosters, adaptogens, antioxidants, and much more. All designed to help you perform better, recover faster, and stay absolutely dialed. I take it every single morning. It mixes clean, tastes great, and I notice an immediate difference. Steady energy, clearer focus, better recovery after training or travel. It's my routine, no questions, every day. If you care about showing up your best, not just for a race, but for life, go to v14.com/rideout and use the code RIDEOUT for 30% off. That's v14.com/rideout. Longevity isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. Now, let's get to work with V14. At what point in the capital raising process or what round did you, or was it a conscious decision to look for permanent capital? How did that evolve? Because that's something that founders dream about, is finding permanent capital, meaning investors that aren't necessarily looking for a quick exit. They're more interested in the dividends, which obviously are going to take a while to get. So that to me is like the greatest money you can get. It's usually family office types, because if it's in a fund structure, that fund has to be eventually closed and capital returned to investors. So how was that process and how did you do that?
Our angel investor group was really hard to come by. It took a lot of failure to get there, but we had this incredible group of angels and private investors who right around that time and shortly after met. And most of those were inbound people who discovered our beer and loved it and were like, wanted to have a conversation. And I couldn't believe some of the names that popped into my inbox really early there. Some incredible family offices. Blake Mykoski, the founder of Tom's Shoes, cold emailed me, who I'd really looked up to, his Tom's Shoes company, and the double bottom line impact of that business, which, Athletic has been a double or triple bottom line business from day one. We wanted to ingrain that in from day one and not just be like a ESG check the box. Like, we have one of the biggest corporate environmental programs in the country. Beyond that, so we had this incredible passionate group that I was keeping up to speed. And it wasn't like I would go off and do my thing in silence for a year and come back in a panic, like, we got to raise more money. I was writing monthly investor updates to take them along on the journey because I knew there was high probability of failure here.
Yep.
And I wanted this journey to be impactful for them. And I wanted them to have the talking points to go to their friends and be proud of Athletic. And so I wrote monthly investor updates along the way. And then when it came time to raise money, I'd be like, and like the what's next section is like, hey, we're going to start to go out to like more institutional investors and, try to raise like one of the things. So we'd built this, we thought it was the perfect brewery. It was 10,000 square feet. It was our dream equipment. John and I knew every inch of that brewery, every piece of equipment, everything. We poured our heart and soul into that construction project. And we had such a lean team. It was the first non-alcoholic brewery and tap room in the country. I would work the tap room on weekends, plus do events. Another credit to my wife. She'd be like, how many people came to the tap room? And I'd be like, please don't ask. But we did have people come from like all over the country too. Yeah. In that, I would say, oh, we're about to go out to institutional investors. And our investor would be like, wait.
That's right.
I'm really excited about this. I know I made my angel check, but now I'm ready to do my real check.
Yeah.
And every time I would go to raise institutional capital, I'd actually just be way oversubscribed from our internal team. That private investor group took us very far and gave us good leverage as we did get to a scale where our second brewery was a more distressed asset in San Diego. So we took that over and put another $10 million into it. And that helped us. Well, so that brewery, just to finish the story, we had put our heart and soul into this brewery, and it's so expensive and time consuming to build your own manufacturing. And then we outgrew that brewery in 10 months.
Oh my God.
And at first the sales weren't great out in the world, and then they just started to go exponential. And coming around to that first full summer on the market, we'd outgrown the brewery. And
in the first 12 months, you had outgrown your wildest expectations.
Yeah, we thought a brewery that would last us 5 years, we'd outgrown. So our original fermenters were 40 barrel.
Yep.
We bought 3 used 100-barrel fermenters and dropped them in with a crane in June to try to meet summer demand. And we outgrew that in a month. And the business is just going exponential. It's available national on e-commerce at this time, which is the first D2C beer brand ever. And so we were off and running and sprinting. And so I started looking around at breweries around the country that, we didn't have time to build something big from the ground up. So we had to buy an existing craft brewery. And plus, since we had launched nationally on e-commerce, we were shipping a bunch of beer all the way across the country to California and the Pacific Northwest. And
that eats into the profit margin, obviously.
Yeah, the cost of the shipping was more than anything in the beer. And so we were losing money on every case we sold. And so our next brewery is in San Diego.
There's so many valuable lessons here. I hope people hear that you were losing money but had the wherewithal and the vision to stay the course and just be like, okay, this is part of raising visibility. And one quick note to your point earlier about the early capital, for people that aren't in the finance world, I just want to simplify things to the extent that I can, is it's like anything. The money's super hard to raise until people realize that you have it, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't have the vision to see that on my own, but now that I see what's going on, I want to be as involved as I can. I helped a girl, was trying to help her raise some money for a small CPG brand, and she got Novak Djokovic to be her co-founder, put in $1 million, and then all of a sudden the people that wouldn't take a meeting are now begging me to get big funds, and I'm like, this is life. This is same thing. So when you have the money,
it's all momentum and scarcity. And I can't tell you how many people passed on an intro call from that first round and then came up later at conferences and stuff. And nothing against them.
No, of course.
I understand how the investing world goes. And rightfully so. We were taking a very capital intensive approach to a market with no momentum.
And a lot of times people will say, like, listen, I don't like the risk at this point. I'd rather pay a much higher premium and like de-risk it a little. There's just risk appetite, but it's hard not to take those early no's personally. And one last note on that, when you're an investor, 9 times out of 10, you have the first, like when there's a future capital raising, you typically have the right to put in the money first. Comes with the territory of being an early investor. You have first right of refusal to fund those future obligations. But from a founder's perspective, the challenge then becomes, well, I need some other thought leaders around the space. Maybe there's someone with international experience of a private equity fund that can help you scale. But again, focusing on the permanent capital, that audience is very limited. So that's that part of the journey to me is always what's so compelling is what you were able to do on the funding side.
Thank you. I mean, I learned so much along the way, had great people around the table helping me too, like unbelievable mentorship. Some of our existing board members have been on the board for 6+ years.
But it's up to you to put those people around you. I get that you want to share like the glory with others, but it's important to know that someone's captaining the ship.
Yeah, I was like hedge fund guy with CFA, and I was like, oh, I know everything about finance. That operating model I drew up, that operating model was for running a brewery at 100% utilization.
Yeah.
Which was one of the toughest lessons to learn, is that in a business with any element of growth, let alone 200, 300% year-over-year growth, that brewery is never going to be running at 100%. It's going to be it's going to be 20, 30, 60, 90% utilized. And then you're going to be into the next one that's 10% utilized. And so evening out those capital cliffs too, building manufacturing is so expensive and it's so rapid. So we had this incredible group of angel investors who are still supporting us to this day, basically, a lot of them. And then I did have the luxury of getting to meet institutional investors over that time and build real relationships. And almost none of our investors have invested in the round when I met them or that time frame. It's always been like a 1 or 2 year getting to know you. And then you get an unbelievable partner who's seen you execute, seen you do what you say you're going to do a couple times. And then we've been able to bring in incredible institutional partners along, our private investors too, who help us do those rapid scales. So first it was Alliance Consumer Growth, which is a great, more like small to mid-sized consumer private equity fund. They were involved in some unbelievable stories like Shake Shack, for example. Yep. But like a firm like that helped us scale up that San Diego brewery to being like, one of the biggest craft breweries on the West Coast. And then basically a year later, we started building a brewery that was about 100 times the output of that original Stratford brewery, a few miles up the road in Milford, Connecticut. And so, envisioning a 500,000 barrel brewery, 150,000 square foot space, all the capital in the ground, like just to put it into context, like even the cement, like the day the cement was poured for just phase 1, it was 37 cement trucks coming in. These tanks, it was 110 shipping containers of stuff arriving at the brewery. Like these are real capital projects. And so we eventually have also grown into great capital partners who've helped support us, like Alliance Consumer Growth, Keurig Dr. Pepper's been an amazing partner, and now General Atlantic as well.
That's a top tier investor cap table. That's a crazy lineup.
And along the way, if you think, so we're doing like hard to implement things, very expensive. And in the backdrop, there are multiple economic cycles going on here too. Yeah. The week we signed our lease in San Diego, we all lived in Connecticut at the time, COVID broke out. And we had the COVID cycle. Then we were building the Connecticut brewery during the international shipping crisis. 2022, interest rates went vertical, just 5% in 3 months or something like that. Like, I know 5% interest rate hikes in 3 months has effects in every corner of the economy. It especially has effects if you're running a manufacturing business with a lot of exponentially growing working capital. And then, 2022 had a pretty bad recession also. And then, 2024, there's interesting challenges too. But one of the things that emerged during this is we had built such a vertical company. My philosophy was always like hire people full time, give them a ton of opportunity, let people run with that opportunity, use as few agencies as possible.
Yep.
Where most CPG is like 95% externalized.
That's right.
we were 95% internalized. And so when things like COVID hit and stuff, like John and I would get teams around the table, we'd do manuals, we'd figure out how it worked for us. And we were able to plow through these different economic cycles between our investors, our board, and how we were building the company. Ended up being like an unbelievable decision for us.
When the sales started going vertical, did you have moments with you, maybe you and your wife together, just looking at it like, oh my God, we're doing it. It's going to work.
Um, it's so hard when people ask like, what are the moments you knew it was going to work? Because there were like, even like a month or two after we launched in Connecticut, I'm like in my Greenwich Whole Foods or like some of these local Whole Foods and looking at the shelf, I'm like, man, it's Sunday afternoon and that beer is still on the shelf. And so I'd like get it into the cart and I'd be like, people will discover it eventually. But one of the light bulbs went on to me was like, we have no marketing budget and nothing has changed on this non-alcoholic beer shelf in 30 years. Why all of a sudden would there be a lot of people like checking out if something's new over there? Yeah. Like when I stopped drinking, I looked at it once, realized it was like basically non-existent and like didn't look again. So I knew I had to go out to the world and bring those people to the store. And so I started every weekend and during the week setting up at like, I was the target customer. I didn't have to like go Google, do a focus group like, who do you think drinks this? Like, how are we going to brand it? Like this company is my life. It is just like exuded in a can and imagery and ethos. So I went out to places I would be on weekends, like, hey, trail half marathons, ultra marathons, the biggest, marathons in the country, doing guerrilla stuff. But anywhere within a 6-mile radius of Connecticut, I started to go out and hand out hundreds, if not thousands of beers a weekend, set up a tent, try to get people to talk to me. That's where it started to click. I would say if you asked me a single moment where like I knew it was going to work is like when you put the beer in someone's hand who was like a total non-considerer, but I would get them to try a beer and you like see them like take a sip, like half-hearted, but then like they start to lock in, their eyes start to go wide. And there was this like magic in realizing the taste. And I saw those interactions like, on a given weekend. At first it was like, I'd have like some breakthroughs and then I'd start to see that like 100 times on a weekend. And I'd know that they would go out and tell other people about it and be like, hey, you got to try this. It is shocking. I would say that's when I knew we were going to make it, is when I started to see the individual reactions to it. And that's when it started to happen too. Like it just, I think those people and like word of mouth between our investors, our ambassadors, people I met at races. I did 75 races that summer. So, I must have driven 100,000 people maybe to stores, but it was high velocity. And then at the end of that year, we brought on 5 salespeople to like help me cover New England. Like originally I was covering New England. Yeah. Like incredible teammates. Basically all of them are still with us to this day, have grown nicely with the company. But then they had the energy I had too. And like, that's when it just started to go exponential. Yeah.
It's amazing to me that you even had the like insight or the knowledge to know how to do that. Like from a marketing standpoint, you're trading equities one day, now you're running a CPG brand and you have the understanding that, okay, I need to get to the races and now I'm a bear salesman. And obviously, like you said, you've overachieved in a lot of areas of your life. So it doesn't surprise me, but it is interesting that I don't think a lot of people understand is when you're running a business, any kind of business, you have to become an expert at everything. You need to be the accountant. You need to know marketing and sales. You need to know manufacturing, at least have like a basic understanding if you're going to be successful. So that part of the story is always compelling to me, is like how you instinctively knew the marketing moves to make. And the other thing I'll say is whenever I post anything about Athletic Brewing, the overwhelming feedback, and it's always more than any brand like that I've worked with, is that people feel passionate about beer in particular. And they always say, like, either the wife will say, my husband loves Athletic Brewing, or I'll get someone to be like, I just had Athletic Brewing. I love the taste. It tastes better than real beer. And I've never been a huge beer person per se, but like these have become a staple in my house. It's certainly since my wife was recently diagnosed with breast cancer and stopped drinking. And she's more of a beer drinker than me, but she plows through Athletic Brewing beers. It's crazy. And
we hear those stories. I started the business for personal impact, like, and that fulfillment. And yeah, it's really tough. Like I think the key element is passion for what you're doing. 'Cause like entrepreneurship is so tough. Like there are no days off. You go home for dinner on Friday night and your wife's like, do you want to watch a movie? I'm like, sorry, I got to do the accounting. And, you end up being up till 2 a.m. trying to like figure out what's going on with the accounting and like why QuickBooks isn't reconciling and like it just trying to
Even
make heads.
hearing that is like kryptonite for me. I'm like, oh God.
And I had like every advantage coming into that too. But then I'd be like, and I have to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow to be like the first one at this race and like set up. And she'd be like, okay, see you on Sunday. Like, and it is, and then the weekdays are even more of a grind. But what did fill me up was those, like you just mentioned, your wife and your personal experience, like those inbounds I would get where people were like, I thought I had lost social connection forever. Like I hadn't watched sports with my friends or my father. Like people would be like, I hadn't watched a baseball game with my dad in 20 years after he stopped drinking. And I brought over a 6-pack of Athletic. And it was like these moments of people are like reconnection or, alcoholics who'd been trying to stop drinking for 30 years with no success, finally it clicking. Like those emails like fill the cup right back up. And you just, it's kind of like anything. If the passion's there, anything's easy. But like, in this day and age, like burnout is such a thing. And like people are like complaining about burnout. But like, honestly, I think a lot about that is like, I think it's like a lot of work from home. Like we see by far the most like burnout and like people who are just working from home and don't have like work community, like colleagues to share the experience with. But also when you don't have like shared purpose and passion and like impact into what you're doing, or like there's no why, like work is incredibly tiring and stressful and empty. But I found I could plow through anything with this like passion and like I wanted to be working on Athletic all the time.
When you think back on the early days, can you highlight like one big marketing win that was like the most brilliant idea I had? And can you also think of like a bad idea where you were like, oh my God, what a disaster and a waste of money that was? I think for people listening that are contemplating being founder or maybe are founders, I think these stories are compelling.
I would say there were all sorts of losses. Like I thought I was like putting together this like great Final Four event at the tap room and stuff. And I'd like blow my whole like Friday preparing for it, the weekend activating it, and like no one would show up. And like that is a huge hit on resources. When when the company's resources are basically my time and, I don't mean to make this about me. Like John is basically running the breweries by himself at this point too, which is John has like we have very parallel heroes and learning journeys along this whole process. And all of our teammates that joined us too, like all of our early teammates were entrepreneurs and did such an amazing job. But like one of the biggest wins then was, something I didn't even have a hand in at all. Like all of a sudden, like I noticed our social media was going crazy. I was like, what is going on? And then just like my phone starts blowing up with pictures of, the 7-time CrossFit champion, Matt Frazier, had just posted drinking an Athletic on his couch. It was an ad for another brand, but he was drinking Athletic. And, he was like just the pinnacle of like elite fitness.
Yeah.
And, someone that people look to for fitness advice, fitness hacks, everything. And it just absolutely blew up on social. And, Matt is obviously we reached out to him and built a relationship, but he's an incredible guy, him and his wife. And they were very incredible longtime brand ambassadors. And he's a great human. So that was one thing that the universe just dropped in our lap. And there've been so many things like that as well.
That's what I hope people take away from this is that you have to just keep taking shots on net because no shots equal no goals. And you just never know. I mean, I've done podcast interviews where in the early days of my own journey where I didn't really know the people hosting the show, it ended up being huge shows. And I would wake up and like you say, there would be like 5,000 or 10,000 new followers. And I'd be like, oh my God, I forgot I even did that interview. But the point is, if you're not out there doing those things, you're not going to know what could possibly happen. You have to be incredibly optimistic and not afraid to like be out there making moves.
You got to be out there increasing your surface area too. Yeah. And like, saying yes to a lot of things, being in a lot of rooms, and you never know where someone else is on their journey too. Yep. Like a lot of the good relationships I've built with other founder friends or people, like those people just turned out to be really early on their journey too. It's been fun to grow together, and those have been really fruitful relationships. I'm a big believer of responding to as much as I can authentically, being out there as much as I can, and putting myself out there. I think I might be misattributing this, but Mark Andreessen talks about like how luck's not going to come knock on your door while you're watching Netflix.
That's
Like
right.
luck is going to come when you say yes to have pizza with an interesting group of people who have a fun idea. Like that was his example. But like my equivalent of that is like, you can go to a conference and just sit there and listen and not talk to anyone, or you can put yourself in a place of discomfort and talk to everyone. Or when you're standing in line at the airport, like my wife hates this, but like I talk to the people in front and behind me at the airport. I'm like, oh, what do you do? Like, where are you coming from? Where are you going? I can't tell you how many interesting people, like one of our biggest sports partners I sat next to on a plane. I was like, oh, are you with them? And like, or no, I didn't even know who they were with. I asked like, why are you going to San Diego? But like, just putting yourself out there and talking to people. And Darren Ravel's been one of our best investors from a very early time.
Yeah, I did the bear mile with him in Chicago.
Oh, incredible. And like just incredible human. And the way I met him was, he was on a panel at a conference I was at. And after like that panel ended, I like scooted right up the aisle and I was the first one there ready to shake his hand when he got off and like made a joke. And he asked, what are you working on? And I said, I'm making modern beer, or beer for the modern adult, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's gonna be bigger than any beer brand and he was like, tell me more. And like, you got to put yourself out there.
So now you've got the 2 breweries in Connecticut, San Diego. Things are going well. You said earlier you took on investment from General Atlantic, which is probably infinite capital. What's next?
Just step by step, I'm a big believer of, driving down the middle lane at 65 miles an hour. It's like, probably big parallels to your journey, but if you just like show up and do the work every day, I think one of my superpowers is it's not like, I'm not like a social media aficionado who's going to have these breakthrough social media moments or not. It's not going to be these like huge singular spikes. Like our collective story at Athletic is just showing up and doing the thing every day. And I think one of my biggest superpowers, both back in my finance career and now, is no matter how tough a day is, I can clear the windshield wipers at night and start the next day with like a full fresh head of steam, like nothing happened. Like I didn't take a brick to the forehead the day before. And, I'm just a big optimist and show up every day, do the thing, try as hard as I can. And that is like relentless and exhausting to compete against. And if you're just there every day doing it, and I make sure I knock off like 3 key things every day, that is an unbelievable amount of progress in a year. And, take care of myself and take care of my family. And so that's a very long way of saying that, like trying to compound to some really big goals here. I take a lot of inspiration from some of the great brands out there. Like I think Red Bull's an incredible success story. Basically envisioned a whole new category. Like energy drinks basically didn't exist before that. They reimagined the marketing and reimagined the product of what a category could be and just stuck at it for 30 years. And, it wasn't a bunch of like 100% growth years. It was like 10, 15% growth years. And that's what we're trying to do at Athletic. Like we've been talking about how hard the boulder was to get from 0% of beer to 2% of beer. And that was so expensive, so hard, so many one-to-one contacts and handshakes and convincing people. But we've seen well beyond where 2%, so non-alcoholic beer is 2% of all beer in this country at this point, which is a nice trajectory. And most people in the industry project it to end up at 3 or 4% in the long term. I look at common sense. Like people are not drinking alcohol 99% of the time. There are so many occasions out there and there's way more opportunity for non-alcoholic beer than there is alcoholic beer. And I think there's going to be a flippening at some point. But that being said, we've already seen almost every mainstream beer channel in this country, from the biggest grocery stores to the biggest mass retailers, past 3, 4, 5% of beer. So I know it's going very quickly past 5%. But now all the leading edge retailers are starting to pass 10% of beer, like all the healthy grocery stores and stuff. And we had a national retailer pass 20% of beer last year.
Wow.
I think the leading edge of this and where it's going is going to be, it's that famous quote, like people underestimate 1 year, or people overestimate 1 year, underestimate 10.
Yeah.
And I think where we turn around in 10 years, like by the time our generation has so much baggage around drinking, people turning 21 right now have absolutely no loyalty to alcohol. Like,
No, I
and
was
so,
telling, speak, sorry to interrupt, but I have a 15 and 14-year-old. The 15-year-old's freshman in high school, 14's in eighth grade. But when I was that age, we were definitely drinking every weekend, like hanging out, going to parties. I've never heard of anyone that my kids hang out with drinking, not even once. Never even heard of it. And I think that there's like, I was asking the other parents at one of the football games, I'm like, have you ever heard of these kids drinking? They're like, no, none of them.
yeah.
It's
And
a huge shift.
yeah, and it's not like I'm out there to like create options and give people options because like I had no options, and in my prior career, like nobody had any options to like be moderate and take that path. And all I wanted to do was create the path, not necessarily like vilify the alcohol industry or
Yeah.
anything. Given that, like in today's corporate world or today's world of everyone's got a phone and a video, like in their pocket, like the way 20 years ago at the like earlier days of our financial careers, if you showed up on a Thursday and Friday and you weren't hung over at work,
Yeah.
it was like you took a half day.
That's right.
basically. If you show up in today's corporate world hungover, like it's like, what are you doing? Like
Yeah,
this
it's
guy's a
completely
total
unacceptable.
embarrassment. And so I think that image of alcohol in the younger generation is going to change so fast. Yeah.
What's next for you on the personal front? I know you have a new baby coming up any day now, and then any races on the horizon?
I'm trying to get back to like more structured races and goals. I've been kind of like a garage animal for like the last, like I do my like one long zone 2 outside a week usually. And then I'm like a garage animal outside of that, like a few like HIT workouts, a few weight workouts, treadmill sprints, stuff like that. But I want to put some exciting things on the calendar, whether that's Spartan races, high rocks, or I tend to knock out like a trail half marathon at least a year, which keeps my like zone 2 serious on the weekends. But I'd like to put some bigger things on the radar. And I've had this 38-mile mountain race on the radar for a while, I think. Probably not in a baby year, but the year after that, I'd love to hit that. So yeah, I want to get some more structured things back on the radar. I don't think I'm in, at least yet, in the world of Gobi marches and stuff like that. But I think in 5 or 10 years, maybe the two of us put something really big on the calendar.
Hell yeah. Well, for the record, I was never on the Gobi March route either until someone said it to me one day, and I was just like, I bet you I can win. And it was just irrational exuberance.
I remember that phone call. I mean, we hadn't known each other that long, and it had to be in our first 3 phone calls together. Like we connected like lightning in our first conversation, and then you're like, Bill, I'm trying to get into this race last minute, need a few sponsors. I'm going to win it. Yeah. That was incredible. Yeah.
And I talked to your communications guy, Chris, and after the race, he's like, wow, I can't believe you did it. And I was like, what do you mean you can't believe it? He goes, you know how many people call us and tell us they're going to do this, that, and the third, and no one does it? Yeah. So I have someone call up and be like, hey, I'm looking for a sponsor. I'm going to win this race. Yeah. And actually do it is crazy.
Yeah, the amount of people who've reached out and been like, we're going to ride across the country, we're going to row across the ocean, and like you never hear about them again. And like I start Googling, I'm like, did they die in the ocean, or like what happened?
Well, I will tell you, when you do that and you have partners like yourself and I show up there, like it takes on, it no longer becomes like, oh, let me see what I can do here. I'm like, oh my God, I'm representing like a lot of people here. I've got to do it. But I thrive on that, and I really enjoy the community and think like, no, even when I won the World Marathon Age Group Championships, I genuinely thought, I did this for all of us. I think of you as a peer and a friend, and I'm like, I won for everyone. I hope that everyone feels like Ken's our representative at that race, and he did it. So we all win a little bit. And that's how I feel about Athletic Brewing. When I see you winning, I'm like, I'm winning too. Bill's my friend. We're in this together. It's so much more fun supporting people, even if it's like, it's so natural for people to root against others and be like, you know, let jealousy like permeate and you don't even realize it. But when you can identify that feeling and turn it into like, no, I want to support this guy because if he wins, I can feel like I'm winning a little bit too.
For sure.
And that has been like a huge mindset shift for me as I've gotten older and been sober and like putting my effort into like doing things hard, because I recognize when people are supporting me. Same thing when my wife got sick. Like I recognize like the kind of calls that I get from people like you and the people that are on your team. You really learn a lot from someone when you're like in the fight and people show up with their guns. Like who do we have problems with?
Oh yeah. When you stop paying $1 million in commissions a year, like who still checks in?
That's
like,
exactly
who
right.
Still texts you about sports and stuff, and like carried through some amazing friendships from that world to present day when people have no skin in the game, and that's where it's really meaningful for sure. Yeah.
Well, I know that you have a very busy schedule today, and I just want to say thanks. I love and appreciate you and everything that you're doing, and I can't thank you enough for making the time for me today. I hope that aspiring entrepreneurs and founders get something out of this, because I think your story is incredibly inspiring, and I'm proud to be a friend.
Oh, thank you so much. It's totally mutual. The way you inspire people to do hard things, and I think your book's gonna have an enormous amount of impact.
Well, thank you, brother. With that, thanks for being with us, guys. Please like and subscribe to the videos. Thank you. Boom. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Please take a quick minute to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. This is a new show, so subscribing makes a huge difference. Please also take a minute to give it a review and leave a comment on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You can also subscribe and leave a comment on YouTube. Again, this is really important for us, especially now since we're just getting started. Please also check out all of our sponsors. They make the show possible, and honestly, I love and use every single product we talk about on the show. You can learn more about me, this podcast, and also find links to purchase my upcoming memoir at theothersideofhard.com. My new book is called Everything You Want Is on the Other Side of Hard, and it comes out March 10th, available everywhere you buy books. Or again, go into theothersideofhard.com. There's multiple links there where you can find all the retailers carrying the book. Thanks a lot for being with us, and we'll see you next week.